Hey guys, Grim here. Today we're talking about faster cast rate in Diablo 2, a stat that is responsible for the rate at which your character's spells are applied. For the beginners it may seem that there is nothing to discuss here, the more FCR you have the better. But it's not that simple. Diablo 2 is a game from 2000s and casting speed there measured in frames. The game runs on 25 frames basis. This means that all animations in the game that occur, be that running, shooting, hitting, or something else, it doesn't matter, all these animations are calculated not in the usual sense, not in seconds or milliseconds, but in frames. Let's take a look at the table. The number 0 in front of each character shows how quickly this character casts a spell if his FCR is 0. Here we can notice that the fastest casters in the game are the sorceress, if she casts any spells except lightning, and oddly enough the barbarian. These two characters can apply spells with the highest possible speed, one spell every 13 frames. Now let's see how this parameter actually changes if we use a different gear. We removed two things from the sorceress and now she got the faster cast rate parameter equal to 20%. According to the table, this gives us an 11 frames casting. But what if we can get FCR to 35%? According to the table, this is still an 11 frames cast, even though FCR increased by a lot. Let's take a look. As you can see, the casting speed on the video is the same. Spells are cast at precisely the same rate. Now let's try to go over the breakpoint. The next breakpoint is 37%. We put the gloves back on and now we have 55% faster cast rate. This should give us a 10 frames cast. If we compare it with the previous speed, we see a slight increase in casting speed. Finally, 105% faster cast rate is what we had on a character initially, and as you can see it is noticeably faster than the initial 11 frames cast. Typically 105% FCR is considered a soft cap for sorcerers using fire or cold magic. For lightning sorcerers the recommended parameter is 117%, which is slightly more challenging to achieve. So to sum it up, we need to pay attention to the FCR stat in terms of frames and these breakpoints and not just a number itself. For example, let's take a look at the shield that we have. It contains the rune word Spirit. FCR stat on it may vary from 25% to 35%. If the shield had a parameter of 34% instead of 35%, then the total FCR would be 104, which means the casting speed would be 9 frames instead of 8 frames. So this 1% make a huge difference because it's on a breakpoint. Sorcerers can get to 200% faster cast rate, but these are very expensive and situational builds where you have to sacrifice some damage and other stats for additional FCR. We sorted out the sorcerers and now let's move on to Paladin. One of the most popular Paladin builds is Hammered In. That is the Paladin who uses hammer spells to slay the enemies, and this spell is also affected by the faster cast rate parameter. According to the table, there is no point in getting more than 125% FCR. It is a hard cap that will make your hammers and 9 frames cast. So even if you gain a terrific 200% faster cast rate on your Paladin, you will see no increase in casting speed whatsoever compared to 125% FCR. As for other Paladin builds that rely on hitting enemies in melee, FCR doesn't affect them at all. The same 125% hard cap applies to the Necromancer, but the Necromancer can exist in two forms. He can be a human, in which case he has a separate FCR table, or he can be in the form of vampire, in which case he acquires completely different faster cast rate parameters, which significantly slows down the speed of his skills. This should be taken into account if you plan to collect a complete set of triangles for your Necro, which will turn you into the vampire. However, if you're playing a summoned Necromancer, it doesn't matter that much with what speed you resurrect your minions, so the FCR parameter is less important. Secondly, the Necromancer can use curses. Again, it doesn't really matter how fast you apply them to your enemies. Therefore, the Necro can somewhat ignore the faster cast rate parameter, except when you play the Bone Necro, in which cases you'll be looking to reach certain breakpoints. We have an opposite situation with the Druid. In the form of human, he casts spells much more slowly than in the form of the wolf or the bear. However, Druid in animal form doesn't have the access to standard spells that he can use in human form. Therefore, as a rule, the FCR parameter is calculated for the Elemental Druid, who uses Tornado, Volcano, and similar spells of that school, so pay attention for the respective row in the FCR table. Quick mention about Barbarians. At the first glance you might ask why a Barbarian needs FCR, and the optimal values are indicated in the table. This class needs some FCR if he is wearing Enigma and wants to teleport faster. However, as a rule, Barbarians don't bother with this and don't equip FCR gear, for the exception of PvP battles. Let's look at the Assassin. They have 3 skill trees that they progress through: Martial Arts, Shadow Discipline, and Traps. Typically, Trap Assassin uses a Lightning Sentry and Death Sentry spells. Lightning Sentry does not use the FCR parameter to calculate the rate of lightning strikes. In fact, within the framework of the game, the Lightning Sentry spell is considered a summoned creature, therefore your parameters do not apply to it. But the increased attack speed parameter affects the speed of throwing traps. The higher it is, the faster you can throw them. The Martial Arts skill tree is also unaffected by the FCR. In Shadow Discipline skill tree, one of the most critical skills for the Assassin is Mind Blast. It allows you to stun opponents, and this spell is what the FCR parameter applies to. So do you need to boost the faster cast rate parameter for the sake of one spell? The answer is yes and no. If you plan just to complete the game or engage in farming, you do not need to boost the FCR parameter to use this spell. However, if you engage in PvP on your Assassin, Mind Blast will be one of your primary spells to use, therefore the FCR parameter will be important to you. And lastly, the Amazon is the only character who is 100% dependent only on the attack speed parameters and can fully ignore the faster cast rate. That's it for this video, thank you for watching and see you next time.